favorite books. My name is Dr. Tom Houlihan, and I am a member of the Granville County Public Schools Board of Education, and it is just great to be here to share with you my book that I'm sharing with you called Jackson to the Rescue. This book was written in part from my son, Andrew Houlihan, with me being involved as well, and one of the teachers, Miss Shafer, that he worked with to put this book together. This book is about diabetes, and I'm not sure all of you know what that term means, but diabetes is an illness that involves your blood sugar, and we'll be talking about that as we move forward. There are many students in our school system and many teachers and others who have diabetes. And maybe your mother or your dad or your grandfather or your grandmother or your brothers and sisters, somebody in your family or somebody you know may have this thing that is called diabetes. And we'll be going through it today. The person there are two people most important in this book. And the first one is a student in a class called Jackson. And if you notice, the title of the book is Jackson to the Rescue. And then the second person that is really important is someone by the name of Jenna. And you'll get to meet both of them as we go along with the book. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Jackson to the Rescue. You can see this. Here's a good picture of Jackson over and over again in the classroom. And you can see he's a young man in school in a classroom somewhere away. Hi, my name is Jackson. For some reason, that's a last name. My dad said I should be glad our last name isn't Jackson, or I would be Jackson. Anyway, do I have a story to tell you today? But only if you like hearing about blood, snacks, and exciting things that happen at school. Everybody can see? I remember it was a Tuesday because I love Tuesdays. It's pizza day in the cafeteria. It's the only day I don't bring my lunch to school. Lunch was still hours away, and my teacher, Mrs. Hubbard, was talking about the importance of the environment and science. I was more concerned with the environment outside the classroom window when there was a knock on our door. I'm sure you can see that as well. Our principal, Dr. Gray, slowly opened the door and looked in. Standing beside him was the one thing that gets me really nervous. A new student, and not just any new student, it was a she. I don't know why new kids make me nervous. Maybe it's because I know I'm going to have to be nice to them for a day or two, whether I want to or not. Jackson sounds a little bit kind of, maybe a little bit like some of us, but he's a pretty interesting fellow. Dr. Gray has brought in a new student and says, Mrs. Hubbard, I have a new student for you. Her name is Jenna. Boys and girls, please say hello to Jenna. Hello, Jenna, we all said at once. I don't know anything about her, but I knew one thing for sure. The only empty seat in the whole classroom was right near beside me. And it was about to be filled by her. And all I wanted today was pizza. As the next few days passed, Jenna began making friends with some of the other students. She seemed nice and was generally kind, but I didn't talk to her very much. I noticed she was always having food with her, and she was often allowed to go to the school nurse. Why does Jenna get to eat a snack and we don't? I asked Mrs. Hubbard. Don't worry about that, Jackson, said Mrs. Hubbard. We can talk about that later. I also noticed that Jenna was called to the nurse's office every day. I figured Mrs. Hubbard wouldn't tell me why, so I didn't ask. I hope you like this so far. One day we were outside at recess when suddenly Liz, who was playing with Jenna, started jumping up and down and screaming, Mrs. Hubbard, come quick. There's something going on. I wondered, something bad for sure. Mrs. Hubbard ran over to see what had happened. Everyone back up, she said. Back up. Liz, go to the office and get the nurse. Quickly. Before I knew it, Mrs. Smith, the school nurse, bolted to the school, to the scene, and ran over before I knew it. Before I knew it, Mrs. Smith, the school nurse, had said, back up, back up. I couldn't see or hear much because of the large crowd that had gathered to see what was going on. I couldn't see or hear anything because of all this. I just couldn't see. I thought I heard someone say, it's Jenna. She is shaking on the ground. Everyone line up, said Mrs. Hubbard. Let's go inside and let Mrs. Smith take care of this. Everything is going to be just fine, she added. What's wrong with Jenna? Liz whispered as we made our way to the classroom. I don't know, I replied, but it must be pretty bad. Maybe an ambulance will come and guys will load her on a big stretcher and put a mask on her and we'll get to watch, Jackson said. Jackson, scolded Liz as she nudged me with her elbow. Don't be so mean. Don't be so mean at all, Liz said, that into terms of making sure I understand that I shouldn't be so mean. When we got back to our seats, Mrs. Hubbard said, okay, let's talk about what happened to Jenna. Will an ambulance come, I asked. What a siren. What about a siren? Liz covered her face and said with her hands, no, Jackson. Some of you have asked about why Jenna gets to eat snacks or has to go to the nurse so often. She has a disease that is called diabetes. It affects the way her body feels each and every day. I'm going to go over this thing. Just like all of us, Jenna has what is called blood sugar, Mrs. Hubbard continued. Yuck, said Liz. For you and me, our body produces a special kind of chemical that we call insulin. All of us produce insulin if we're not diabetic. It controls our blood sugar, but for Jenna, her body doesn't produce what we call blood sugar. Jenna eats snacks sometimes to help keep her blood sugar normal. And she goes to the nurse sometimes to check her blood sugar or take her insulin. Since her body doesn't make it, she has to take a shot so that she gets the right amount to make her body feel normal, like you and me. Sometimes when she has too much insulin, her blood sugar gets low, which is what happened on the playground today. A shot at school? Now that didn't sound like much fun. You can see Jenny here with the nurse getting her shot. And maybe when we're through reading, maybe your teacher can talk with you a little bit more about what we mean by blood sugar. It's not probably what you think. Yeah, I thought, that whole thing about getting a shot sounds pretty scary. I like to see things, but I wouldn't want to have to get a shot at school. I bet all of those shots hurt. Since Jenna came, I haven't been very friendly, but now she has diabetes and has to go through that every day. It makes me want to find a way to help her. When I got home from school, I thought about what Mrs. Hubbard had told us about diabetes. I remember she said something about blood sugar. Who stops blood? What stops blood? I asked myself. Band-Aids. Band-Aids help stop blood. I searched my entire house for Band-Aids. I emptied all of them from the medicine cabinet. I emptied all of them. I also found lots of gauze and tape from when my dad sprained his ankle. This would help Jenna for sure. What else did Mrs. Hubbard say about diabetes? I know, sugar. Sometimes when Jenna has too much insulin, her sugar gets low. We have lots of sugar, Jackson said. I also remembered that Jenna needs snacks. Our pantry is full of snacks. Let's go over this way. That night, as I was going to bed, I heard my mom and dad talking. Do you think Jackson is okay? My mom asked. Sure, why? Replied my dad. He was acting kind of strange today, said my mom. This afternoon, he was sneaking around the house and collecting stuff for school. I noticed that our medicine cabinets and pantry have been picked over. I can't imagine why he would want to take food and Band-Aids to school. Don't worry, laughed my dad. Maybe he is working on a project for class, like how to head snacks and heal food or something like that. Find snacks or heal food. That's interesting. I thought I was going to get into big trouble. It took me forever to go to sleep that night. I only wanted to help Jenna. The next morning, I woke up ready to rescue Jenna. Why so many bags today, Jackson? Asked my mom as I ran to catch the school bus. Oh, just a project in class. Gotta go. Hope you can see the backpack that Jackson has on that's full of Band-Aids and sugar and snacks. When I got to school, I quickly unloaded all of my rescue items for Jenna into my cubby. Jenna was already in her seat, and when the bell rang for school to start, we all were waiting to hear what Mrs. Hubbard had to say. Yesterday, said Mrs. Hubbard, something very scary happened to Jenna. Jenna, we are so glad you are feeling better. Our whole class wanted to help you, she continued. We really love you and care that you are okay. I raised my hand to get Mrs. Hubbard's attention. "Yes, Jackson." She sounded nervous. Maybe she thought something would be said, I would say, that would be embarrassing. Liz held her breath. "Oh, Mrs. Hubbard, I brought some things to help Jenna with her diabetes." I secretly wanted to show her how much I cared. But I couldn't tell Jenna that out loud. Jenna looked at all of us with a tear in her eye. "I love you all too," she said, "and thank you for being so nice to me." In case you hadn't, this is Jenna, just as you maybe not have seen her earlier in the book, but I wanted to make sure that you saw Jenna and who she was. Right at that moment, there was a crash at the back of the room. Mrs. Hubbard ran over to the cubbies. Band-Aids, snacks, and sugar packets had spilled all over the floor. A big bag of sugar had hit the floor and spilled all over. A bag of sugar was something that I had brought. It was a mess. "Jackson," said Mrs. Hubbard, "what is all of this?" "Well, you should ask that of Jenna sometimes, because she has blood problems. So I brought Band-Aids to stop the blood. I brought sugar to help her that it would not get so low, and snacks to help her body feel better." Jenna had stepped up quietly behind Mrs. Hubbard. She stepped on a bag of chips and began to giggle. Liz rolled her eyes, but she was laughing too. "Oh, Jackson," said Mrs. Hubbard, "you are very thoughtful. But what Jenna really needs are more friends like you." "Thanks, Jackson," said Jenna. "Mrs. Hubbard is right. It's kind of hard to have to watch your blood sugar all day and go to the nurse instead of being in class. What I really need are good friends who understand that I'm just a normal kid with a special condition." "You got it," I said. "Uh-oh, did I just offer to be friends with the new girl?" That afternoon, my mom came to get all of the Band-Aids, sugar, and snacks from our classroom. "Jackson," she said as we were walking out, "why didn't you tell us what you were doing?" "I didn't think you would understand," he said. "This diabetes stuff isn't something parents really get. It's kind of scary." I opened a package of cheese crackers and shoved a few into my mouth as we got to the car. "Jenna's got low blood sugar and has to eat lots of snacks and get shots at school," I mumbled as the crackers crumbled down my shirt. Low blood sugar, Jackson, not low blood. Your Uncle Dan is a diabetic, and he has to do with diabetes and Jenna's blood. It's not blood sugar, it's blood, my mom said. A diabetic is a person who has diabetes. Oh, well, I thought, you would be mad if I took all that stuff to school. Mom opened the trunk and looked at me. Your dad and I will never be mad at you for being a good friend. Now let's load this stuff into the car. She reached over and wiped orange crumbs off my face. Later that week, Mrs. Hubbard told us about her niece, who lived in the next town. She had recently been diagnosed with asthma and sometimes had a hard time breathing. Some days, said Mrs. Hubbard, she feels like she can't get enough air. Jackson to the rescue. Maybe he'll go over and help that person with asthma. But most important, Jackson didn't like that new student at first. But when he found out what was going on with her, and even though he didn't really know what diabetes was, he stepped up. He wanted to help that new girl because he believed that everyone should have help and everyone should have friends if they need it. Superman, Jackson to the rescue. I hope you liked this story. It's kind of a true story. Maybe not completely, but it really, really is true in many, many ways. There are lots of Jennas in school. Maybe a Jenna with diabetes type in your classroom. There also are lots of Jacksons. Maybe they talk rough, and maybe they talk about students who, that new girl in class. But underneath, all of us have a heart that cares about our classmates, and we want to do everything we can. In many ways, all of us are like Jackson to the rescue. I hope you like this book. What's really important to me is that my son has diabetes, and many times when he was in school, he had to get help. He had to go to the nurse because his blood sugar was low. He had to take shots. But just like other diabetics, he wants to be normal, and most of the time he is. I hope you enjoyed the book. Maybe you and your teachers can talk about it a little bit more. I hope you have a great, great day, and thank you for allowing me to share this book, to share Jackson to the rescue with you. Have a great day. Thanks.